The ancient Romans and Greeks are often remembered for their grand philosophies, architectural marvels, and military conquests. However, beneath their sophisticated societies lay a world of shocking, bizarre, and downright disgusting practices that would make even the most open-minded modern individual shudder. From unsanitary hygiene to perverse rituals, their secret lives were filled with acts that defy the sanitized versions of history taught in schools. One of the most repulsive aspects of Roman life was their approach to bodily functions. The Romans were infamous for their public latrines, which lacked privacy and were often social spaces where people sat side by side to relieve themselves while chatting. Worse still, they used a communal sponge on a stick, known as a tussorium, in place of toilet paper. These sponges were not always cleaned properly, leading to widespread infections and diseases. Some of the wealthiest Romans even had slaves dedicated to wiping them clean, a degrading and unhygienic practice that highlights the extremes of class division. The Greeks were no better when it came to disturbing habits. In certain regions, it was common to bathe in the same water multiple times, leading to a buildup of filth. They also had an unsettling obsession with body hair removal, using strange concoctions like a mix of resin and goat fat to strip themselves bare. This process was often performed by slaves, who were forced to deal with the unsanitary nature of their masters' grooming rituals. Additionally, it was customary in some Greek symposia for men to engage in excessive drinking, vomiting, and acts that would be considered depraved by modern standards. Both Greeks and Romans had disturbing dietary habits. Romans enjoyed a delicacy called garum, a fermented fish sauce, made by allowing fish guts to rot in the sun for weeks. The stench was so overwhelming that factories producing garum were banned from city centers. They also gorged themselves at lavish feasts, sometimes inducing vomiting to continue eating, which led to grotesque displays of gluttony. Meanwhile, the Greeks often ate in a reclining position, which combined with excessive drinking, frequently resulted in revolting scenes of regurgitation and mess. Medicine and health practices were equally horrifying. Romans believed in using urine as a cleaning agent for clothes, and even as a teeth whitening solution. The Greek physician Hippocrates advocated treatments that involved drinking human or animal excrement, believing it had healing properties. Some Romans collected the sweat of gladiators, thinking it was an aphrodisiac, and women applied it as a cosmetic. The sheer lack of scientific understanding led to medical procedures that were more akin to torture than treatment. Sexual customs in these ancient civilizations were also shockingly unrestrained. While they are often depicted as societies of high culture, the reality was far darker. The Greeks, particularly in Athens, practiced pederasty, where older men formed mentorship relationships with adolescent boys, a practice that would be considered deeply unethical today. Romans, on the other hand, treated slaves as objects of pleasure, forcing them into acts that modern law would deem criminal. Some emperors such as Caligula and Nero were notorious for their sadistic appetites, engaging in incest, extreme cruelty, and even murder for their own amusement. Religious rituals sometimes took a grotesque turn as well. The Greeks engaged in animal sacrifices where the entrails were examined for omens, a practice that left temples filled with rotting flesh and blood. Romans took it even further, occasionally engaging in human sacrifices, particularly in the early days of their civilization. Some secret cults, such as the Bacchanalian sect, were rumored to engage in orgiastic and blood-drenched rituals that shocked even their contemporaries. Despite their monumental contributions to art, literature, and governance, the private lives of ancient Greeks and Romans were filled with shocking and unhygienic customs that would be considered appalling today. These societies may have laid the foundations for Western civilization, but their darker side reveals a world where filth, cruelty, and excess were as prevalent as philosophy and democracy.